everybody has that inspiration that you can tap into your intuition. And we all have that support on the other side, even when it's veiled, even when we might need to use our imagination.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. I'm so glad to have you with us for another episode, as we're always trying to help you, raise your spirituality, help your connection to spirit, help your meditations if that's something that you're struggling with or even interested in. But today we've got a special guest who's going to cover all of that and then the rest of the universe as well. So we've got a lot to cover today. Her name is Kara Goodwin. She's a skilled energy healer and a meditation guide who empowers others to deepen their own spiritual connection, spiritual path, really using very transformative practices and a number of different things that help that spiritual growth and knowledge of self and knowledge of spirit. So with that, Kara, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be with you today.
Oh, this would be fun. I can't wait to, as I said, cover the universe in just a matter of minutes. This will be fun. This will be great.
Speed round.
Yeah, exactly. Speed round. The speed dating, speed talking, speed round, all the same.
All right.
Great.
Speed podcast.
Speed podcast. There we go. That's a new one. That's a new category we're creating all the time. One of the things I want to kind of begin to talk on is everyone seems to be talking more and more about either spirituality or spiritual awakening. It certainly seems like there's an acceleration going on throughout the planet, more acceptance, more people are either becoming aware of it or actually having their own experiences. In your view, how would you define a spiritual awakening? What does it mean to awaken spiritually? And even more, then the next question comes, somebody says, okay, I've had a spiritual awakening, but how do I know I'm on the right path? What do I do?
Yeah, such great questions. So what is a spiritual awakening? I feel that there are many different kinds and they keep going. Like, I don't feel that there is one spiritual awakening and it's like starts and ends and then you're awakened. I feel that the initial spiritual awakening that people have is usually like, that's where the real sort of blossoming happens because you really shift your perspective. And that can be kind of suddenly depending on the circumstances. But it really goes from living in this physical, material world and having that perspective where what is real is what my five senses can perceive. And that's it. And it's this opening, this expansion into a deeper understanding that there's much more going on than what our five senses can perceive. And so that can happen in any number of ways. For me, it happened through, traumatic experiences kind of all happening quickly all at once. And it just opened me up to, it was like, whoa, what is this? Like, what is life? How do I get some security here? There's got to be more going on than what's under the surface because I can't trust what's on the surface anymore. It's just collapsing around me. And, for other people, it might be a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. For some people, they may have really always kind of been born and that felt connected and never really let that go. And, there might be something where they really kind of lean into that at some point. It can happen all different kinds of ways, but it keeps happening. So I would say that my kind of initial spiritual awakening, and of course, you got all your history. Mine didn't happen until I was in my 30s. But I had been interested in spirit as a child. I had gone to church off and on and didn't really feel so spiritual to me, which was confusing. It felt like I had to learn things rather than, it feels a lot more organic now rather than like trying to fit in stories into like, and how do these ancient stories apply to me?
Yeah.
And then the vengefulness and it was just all like, wait, but there's murdering, like they
Yeah. It's like
murdered
it just didn't make
Jesus.
sense.
Right. Doesn't make sense. So there are all these different levels of awakening, but even though I awakened in my 30s, I'm still awakening. There's still, new things that show up. For example, like my initial awakening took me to meditation. So that was kind of a very early, and in the yogic studies, like Paramhansa Yogananda, the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, that was kind of my first deep dive into spirituality. And those were kind of the parameters that I was exploring the spirituality through. And of course, there are innumerable different ways to connect with your spirit, innumerable lineages. That was just the one that felt right at that time. But, as I was going through that, I wasn't really paying attention to, let's say, astrology or ETs or angels or, sacred geometry and Reiki and all of these things that are also out there that can help us to connect with our spirit, with our higher self. And those things, not all of those things, but let's say ETs, for example. I didn't believe in aliens. I did when I was little.
Right.
And then,
Oh, look, the little green men are coming.
yes, and I was a child of the 80s
Oh, yeah,
and
right.
so it was a big, like there was just this
ET.
big social thing happening. There was ET, there were like the daytime talk shows,
Oh,
there would be
right.
a lot of like kind of scandalous abduction stories. Those were very vibrant at that time. The
Oh,
National Enquirer, that was a popular thing.
yeah.
So it was kind of like under the surface of just regular life, there was a lot of fear and paranoia around ET invasions and people being
Mhm.
abducted. So I was interested in that. I believed it. And then there came this point as when I was an adult where I was still interested in it, but I really doubted anybody. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to resist a story that somebody was telling that they had been abducted or something like that. But I would also, there was a big, healthy dose of doubt in there where it was like, maybe, but they might be just wanting attention or
A
whatever it was that I
large
would tell
grain of
myself.
salt in there.
Yes. And, and that carried on even through my initial spiritual awakening. I didn't put any credence into aliens. I didn't think that they even had a role in spirituality. It took me a while to even understand
Mhm.
why ETs would even go with spirituality. And that was something that, that was another kind of awakening for me that happened over time where it was like, oh, not only do I believe again that this is true, I also understand there's a spiritual element to it. And I also feel that I have a personal connection with some galactic beings, and so those were all different kind of phases and stages of opening my awareness to something that I didn't used to believe. And I have a new book out called Your Authentic Awakening. And I explain this sort of awakening process as having a box, like having an imaginary box. And what you believe is what you allow in the box. And so as our consciousness expands or as we continue our spiritual awakening, that box keeps getting bigger because things that we wouldn't let in, we're starting to say, oh, wait, actually,
Okay.
I do see how that fits in here. I do have
Yep.
space for that now. So it's this expansion, but it's like our box keeps getting bigger and that's important. I think that spiritual awakening, it is this expansion of awareness and what we allow and accept.
That's a spiritual growth right there. And that's what everybody says. Like, well, what is spiritual growth? That analogy of the growing box is perfect because you're just taking in more and more understanding. That's all the growth
Right.
is.
Right. And accepting it too. It's
Except,
like we can have exposure to things, but we may not be able to accept them. And it's not like we have to, I think there is discernment that it
mhm.
has its
Yep.
place.
Yep.
It's not really about going like, oh, I'm awake and now I believe everything. Like that's not gonna be healthy either.
You
We need to
no, don't want to go there.
discern. Right. So, we need a balance and it is something that we want to be, we don't want to be like so guarded, but we also don't want to
Yeah,
be like, okay, I believe anything and everybody can just tell me whatever and I'll do whatever. And
exactly.
you know?
Yeah, and I think that really goes to the point of while you want to trust and surrender, you want to allow, you also have to feel from your heart because your heart will be your compass. Your heart will help you discern, whereas the mind is going to be that skeptical aspect of your being that says, no, it's probably wrong. Be the logical, analytical side that says no, it can't be. Whereas your heart's going to be able to measure it on that scale that says this feels right. So the question I always ask people is, how does it feel to you? If it feels right, go with it. If it doesn't feel right, move on.
Right. And I love that. I mean, I love bringing the heart into that. I think like there is this intelligence in the body, in the human technology that is the body. And
Mm,
so it may be, for some people, they can tune in, like you can physically tune into the center of the chest, into the heart, and you can kind of learn what does a yes feel like? What does a no feel like? Like for me, I can get this like open feeling in the heart, but it's like this warmth. It comes
yeah,
with a warmth. Some people have more of like that clairvoyance where they might see something. Maybe they see like a glow as opposed to a no, which the no would be feel maybe more closed. And you can kind of do exercises. I've got some of that in the book too, where there are exercises to get to know how your heart's communicating with you. And we also just have these like intuitive receptors all through our body. So I was so touched last week. I was having a discussion with somebody and she has a deceased brother. And I was sharing with her how it felt to me that her brother was kind of guiding and orchestrating the timing. This was a new person in my life. I didn't know her very well, but I was like, the email came through at the same time that this other like really important thing came through, and they were such specific,
mm.
like really specific things that tied together. And I was like, so for me, I was like, okay, I'm paying attention.
The
Like, yes, I
synchronicity
will.
was pretty strong.
Very. And I said, so it felt like your brother maybe was working on the other side to get the timing lined up so that it would get my attention. And she goes, oh my God, I feel in the back of my head and down my neck and down my back, I feel all these tingles and I've never felt that before. And that is such a perfect
Right.
way. Like I get that a lot where it's like that
Yeah.
full body yes, the
Hmm.
tingles and
Hmm.
the chills.
Yeah.
And for me, that is a yes. And if people listen to my podcast, Soul Elevation, they'll hear me say that a lot. Like, oh, I just got full body chills, or I just got chills down my spine. And I was just so touched that she had never experienced that before. And she was like, oh my gosh, my body just did this thing. And it was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's your brother is
You're getting
here.
it.
This is,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So super cool.
Yeah, and to your point, it's how does our body react? Well, our body's literally reacting because our auric field is also interacting with the energy that's coming in from spirit. And so, for example, anytime I'm doing either a reading or I'm connecting with guides or I'm connecting with spirit, I know they're connecting with me because they're giving me their little call sign as they wrap their energy around me. I feel like this band of energy up and down my upper arms. So I always know they're there. It's like they have, it kind of feels like they've got a hand on either side of me. And I just feel this tink. I call it the warm champagne bubbles on my arms. And it's like right there. And every single time that comes in, I'm like, all right, well, I know you're here. I can feel it. And it
Yes.
works every single time. I mean, it's going to be different for each person. Some people,
Hmm.
they get cold. Some people, they feel it in their feet, like they're cement. Some people get, the cobwebs in their face. Or, that woman with the tingles all up and down her body. It's like everybody's got something different, but it's that interaction. It's that energetic interaction that you're having.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I was hearing you recently talk about when you had one of your spiritual awakenings and the being like a
Oh,
being that you
shot the
couldn't
energy through
shot
my chest.
it through your
Yeah.
heart. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
did that activate that like did you start noticing that feeling on your arms like after that?
It
Like
was
was that when
after
that
that.
started?
Yeah, it was because it's funny that you mentioned that because at the time I didn't even realize it was my heart. I just thought it was my chest. But as I think back on it, it was the center of my chest, which is where our heart is. So that's clearly where they were going. They were going right through my heart, out through my back and I felt it physically, which basically, said, "Oh, this is real." Okay. But yeah, it was after that all of a sudden the portal reopened where I started feeling all the same energy I did as a kid, because children
Mm.
are naturally open. That's the way their mind is. They're naturally creative. They don't really have a logical, analytical bias where they're shutting things down. They're more open, fairycorns and, fairies and unicorns. That's that's what it
Yeah.
is. So they're
Yeah.
naturally connecting to spirit, but then as they get older, they become more logical, analytical, and shut them down. So that was they basically turned me on again and said, "Okay, you're a child again." I mean, I was always a
Mm.
child anyway.
Yeah. As
As
a Wall
people
Street
know me, I'm just
analyst
like,
or yeah.
yeah, I'm just a 10-year-old.
Sure.
And sometimes my wife kind of gets a little annoyed at that, but that's just the way it goes. But yeah, it was after that point, it's like the portal reopened, and that's when I started feeling, the energy. I was like, because literally after that, it was when I started feeling people around me, energy around me. But I think it was also the concept that I was feeling that energy before. I just didn't know what it was. Like I thought I was a grown man afraid of the dark, because I could feel the energy, but like, oh, that's my fear. It wasn't my
Mm.
fear. It was spirit knocking on the door saying, "Hey, we're here." And I didn't understand what that was. So I think
Yeah.
that's the concept of like somebody who's not spiritually awake to somebody who did have an awakening. It's like it's like someone turns on the light. I would call it like the illumination is better than, as opposed to an awakening. You're awakening to
Yes.
the light. How about that?
Right. Well, and I love how you bring it back to being a child, because that has been a big factor of my awakening as well. It feels like first of all, there's this shedding of the
Yeah.
buildup of like the entrainment of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, here's what society is, here's what you are, here's the box you go in.
100%.
And, that's just a natural part of being, especially in the Western world. We have all of this buildup, this training that we've gone to. It's like they had to teach us how to be modern humans in terms of like the web of society.
We've got to
And
be
we have
good
to,
adults.
yes, that's right. But there is this returning to the child. And, that's even in the Bible where it's like, I can't remember what Jesus says, but it's like, be like the child, it's
Yeah.
the kingdom is for children. That's not how
So,
he
yeah,
says it,
I
but
remember what you
something.
said. Something along those lines. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have never really felt like psychic in the same way that, you would, that you get these messages and things like that. I mean, I have my moments, but they're so spontaneous. And a lot of times they're like as I'm falling asleep. So I don't
Yes.
really like, connect with somebody and then I start getting all this information. I think that's super cool. I would love for that to happen, but it's just not how it works. That's not like really my gift. And I've never felt like that. I've never, some people are like, when I was a kid, I could go to my grandma's house and I'd be like, well, you made cookies 2 days ago or whatever, but I do remember I must have been between 4 and 7 years old, because that's the time that I lived in this particular house. And I would, like, I think it was mostly when I was waking up, I would see behind my closed eyes these colored blobs, really, just like circles. But it would be like, it would look like outer space, it would just look like a void. But in my mind, I'm like, it's space. And I would just see like a large sphere that was, let's say, indigo or purple or something. And then another like kind of smaller one with it that was a different color. And then another one that was a different color. And I would see them. It was like looking back, even as I'm talking about this, I'm like, oh, I think they were like helping me come back in, from being away or whatever. But I remember asking my mom, and this is a memory that just came back like pretty recently, where I even remember that was a thing. And I remember asking my mom, like, what are the colored lights that you see behind your eyes when you're waking up, And she's like, well, did you like rub your eyes? Because when you rub your eyes, then you see those spots. And I'm like, oh, okay. But that wasn't it. It was like, that's a different thing. I know what
Yeah.
that is too. And that's not what that was. But it was like, that was the explanation. And my mom knew everything. So for, a child who's between 4 and 7 years old. It's like, "Oh, my parents know everything and that's how I
That's the
learn,"
gospel.
Exactly. So it was like, "Oh, it's because I must have forgotten that I rubbed my eyes and it does look different," but anyway, and so, you either stop experiencing that, stop paying attention to it. There's no, like, explanation from the outside world that matches up with what, the real truth is. So there are just things like that, and I find that really exciting to
Yeah.
have that part of me reawaken where it's like, that's an old part of me from a, human lifetime perspective, but it's new and it's very much informing, I feel like, the truth of who I really am, even though now I'm a grown up. I'm a grown up. Look at me, but
Congratulations.
it's
Look at that. You've arrived.
so I don't know. I love when people explain it that way too, because there is this, like, this innocence to it, this childlike. It's another piece of it for me is, like, as I've gone through my awakening, because I was kind of in and out of church, not super strongly
Mhm.
family ties to church, but I grew up saying God, thinking God, that kind of thing. And then as I got older, God kind of became a dirty word. That was like a triggering word for a lot of people. And as as I became in my adulthood, I became more agnostic, more like, I'm not saying there's not a God, but I'm not convinced there is. Still really interested in, like, psychic phenomenon, stuff like that. Like, I liked
Things,
evidence.
evidence, things you can understand, things you can, try to piece together because maybe there is an explanation to this stuff, but I just want to know it. I want to be able to
Yeah.
sink my teeth into it. I had that same experience where I was like, well, everybody's talking about God. How do we even know it exists? Everybody says faith. Well, yeah, but it's like I can't believe in something I can't understand or see, or I got to know more. And
Yeah.
I grew up in a very agnostic household. We're like, whatever.
Yeah. Right. And, and then when I had my spiritual awakening too, the God word even became more sensitive because so many people, have really traumatic religious experiences as children.
Just
And
becomes a
then
label.
right. Yes. And if God has been used against them
Mhm.
to control them and they recognize that,
Oh yeah.
or to punish them. God doesn't love kids who do what you just did. God's mad at
Mhm.
you.
Yep.
You caused this because God's punishing us now because
The
of you,
vengeful God.
right? And so when you, like, overcome that, you have a hard time with that word. And so I, like, out of sensitivity for just and because, like, with my spiritual awakening it wasn't religious, and so there was this kind of, like, I want to be secular, but
Yeah.
I'm kind of history and all the last, I want to say, year or so, I have, like, reclaimed for myself the word God because
And the
I
meaning
connected with
behind
it,
it.
the meaning, and because I connected with it so much as a child.
Yeah.
That was like, God was like the spiritual side for me
Yeah.
because I didn't have, like, a lot of religious, again, some, but not a ton. Jesus, yes, but really I was always confused about, like, why Jesus was the middle man and the whole fact that we killed him, but he, like,
Yeah.
died so that we can not have to die. The whole thing was very confusing for me.
Yeah, it totally was. There's so many. It raises so many questions. I was totally on the same boat where it was just like I was questioning everything because nothing made sense to me. I'm like, nothing makes sense. It's all a bunch of malarkey. You're a bunch of And then I started, because I was a history major. I started just going, well, look at history. The control of the church, the indulgences, the payments. Look what's happening to the priests, and yada yada yada. I was like, this makes no sense to me. And then the difference between the vengeful God and the loving God and and it's like, it just became it unraveled. So I had to basically put all the pieces back together my own way, which basically became the spirituality by definition, because I had my own personal relationship with a higher being. And there was no
Right.
label. There was
Mhm.
no, sticker that said, okay, you're going to call it this. It's just my relation to, you know, spirit and the great spirit and everything that's out there. And it
Right.
sort of like evolved that way because everybody can have their personal relationship with whatever higher power they feel connected to, called to, whether that's their great aunt Sarah, who's, their God, or, this personality they are calling the Great Spirit or Source or, the universe. It doesn't, the labels don't matter. It's what's
Mhm.
your connection to it and how do you get
Right.
there? And I think
Right.
that's the giant question. Everybody's like, well, how do I connect? My mind's busy. I'm constantly chattering away. And that's kind of what happened to me. I stumbled into the concept of meditation, which was a very foreign concept. I thought you had to be up in the Hindu Kush and, you had to do all that kind of stuff. But I finally started, playing around with it, liked it. And everybody's like, well, I want to do meditation, but I got a busy mind, so I can't do meditation. I can't sit still. What's your take on meditation? And especially when people are like trying to start out and they hear meditation is great, but how do I do it?
I lived that for sure because I tried meditation several times and didn't feel like I got anywhere with it. It just my mind was racing. I'm like, I'm just sitting here thinking. I might as well sit and think and scroll or walk and think. And, I was intrigued by it. It was always one of those things that, like, if somebody would tell me a cool story about like being able to connect with the other side or having these, like people who had psychic gifts that even through my agnostic period, those stories still intrigued me. And so often meditation was the key factor. That was like what linked all these stories. Many of
Right.
them were meditators. And I wanted that mystery, even if I wasn't sure if God was even a thing. It did seem like something was going on and I wanted to be a part of it. But I just couldn't, quote unquote, couldn't do it. But my life fell apart. And that was kind of the initial spiritual awakening was a result of that, where I had a lot of death. I had major surgeries, major accidents, all happening within my immediate family, meaning like not my husband and children, but like my parents, my husband's parents, his sister, all our dog, but like my little world, but one layer out from my household.
Right.
But all of that happened in a very, very short time in 7
Mm.
months. And it was knocked me, it was
Yeah.
like, and we were living abroad at the time as well. So we couldn't even be with
Oh,
our families as the stuff was happening. And it just felt like my life was unraveling and I didn't recognize, I felt like I was in quicksand. And this was when I was agnostic as well. So one day I was walking back from dropping my kids off at school and I'm having this inner dialogue because I remembered not even praying, but talking to God before I would fall asleep. I did that as a child and a teenager. I would always, even though, again, not a big churchgoer or whatever, but I always talked to God as I was falling asleep and was like, okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to talk to God in my head as I walk. And so it was like, I don't even know if you know who I am because I kind of severed that connection, I know, just over time. But I'm going through a really hard time and I need something. And I feel like meditation, I've been so curious about meditation. I feel like there's something there for me. If that's true, please help me, like lay the path for me, direct me. Please, by the way, let it be in English because I had actually found like I had been invited to a couple of things in like local things, but they were in Italian. And
mm,
I spoke Italian, but like to really like to have your eyes closed and trying to relax deeply. In having to translate and kind of like, did I get
yeah.
that right? Or was that the right? I don't know that verb, whatever. It was not relaxing, and also because there are periods of silence. I had this, like, I took yoga too while I was over there, and I had the same thing where I'm like, there'd just be these periods of silence. And it was like,
Mm.
am I the only one with my eyes still closed? Did I misunderstand what they
Oh,
said?
yes. This
Or
thoughts going through your head.
yes, or like if you're doing yoga and you're like bent forward or something, like, is everybody waiting for me to stand up? Like, did I misunderstand, that because they
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
said anything in a long time.
Yeah, this self-conscious thought that's always going through, you're always, "Oh, yeah, I know
Yes,
exactly."
yes. So it was kinda like, "P.S. God, can you make it in English, if it's okay?" And so, very quickly from there, looking back, it wasn't obvious at the time, but looking back, it was like, wow, things fell into place fast after that.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, recommended a documentary, and that was on meditation. She hadn't even seen it yet. Somebody else recommended it to her, and it
Mm,
made her think of me. And she was like, Kara, you should check this out and let me know if you like it. And that kind of led me to a method that I was attracted to. And that was kind of the springboard. There's a whole story about it, but the difference of why it took once I found the right method for me and I found a teacher, that was the difference. When I had tried meditation before, I had just sat down and I'd been told it's this natural thing, anybody can do it. And so I thought, oh, I just have to sit down and say, I'm meditating now, and my mind is clear. So having a method was huge for me because it is more in my experience, it took more than just sitting down and closing my eyes.
mm,
I needed to incorporate the breath. I needed to have for me, like a mantra was really helpful and having like the full body relaxation and there were all these like steps to it that really helped me. And some people, they just need to count to 20 and that does it for them. But I wasn't one of those people. So for me, that was critical. And that helped me to get over that hurdle of thinking that I can't do it. And so many people think they can't, but it's like, if you put your mind to it, if it is important to you and you put your mind to it, there are a lot of ways to overcome those blocks.
yeah, and the biggest thing that I tell people is, number 1, you'll you've gotta get into a mindset that's relaxed. How and people say, "Well, how do I get relaxed?" Like, well, if you enjoy ambient music, this or like a soft background music, maybe that might help you, try that. And then once you're doing that, just relax and breathe normally, just allow your breath to kind of fall into its own natural rhythm. I'm like, "Okay, well, then what?" I'm like, start focusing on your breath and that'll help you center you and just focus on your breath. Just pay attention to your chest rising, your chest falling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's this little pattern that they start going down. And the next thing you know, they're getting so relaxed. And they're like, okay, so when do I start meditating? I'm like, you've been meditating for the last 10 minutes.
Right. Yes.
And like, I
Exactly.
have been. I'm like, yes, that's what it's all about. Like, well,
Yeah.
doesn't something have to happen? I'm like, no. It's like, imagine you're going to sleep, you're in bed, that feeling of just kind of sliding into this incredibly soft peace. You're not asleep yet, but you're just a soft relaxation. That's all meditation is. You're sliding into a calm state of peace and relaxation where you can just center yourself, whether you're centering yourself on your breath, whether you're centering yourself on a visualization. I mean, there are all kinds of things. And that, I mean, for me, I was a hugely visual person. So I remember the very first meditation, in fact, the one that got me eventually into my spiritual awakening, there was that 12-month meditation that I got so hooked on, was a visualization meditation. And I was like, oh, this is great. I love this visualization. And so I was mentally taken away. And that's, all of a sudden all my thoughts just stop because if we're visualizing, we're somewhere else. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is good. I like this.
Right. Yes. And, I think it's important that we remember that meditation is cumulative as well. So, when we're first starting out, maybe we're doing a 5-minute meditation, which can be a long time when you're first starting out to just be still and continue to bring your thoughts back. 5 minutes can be a long time, but then we do it again, maybe later that day, maybe the next day, but it
Hmm.
keeps getting easier. It is very much like going to the gym and lifting weights. And, you might feel sore after you spend one session lifting weights, but you're not really going to notice a difference in your strength. But if you keep building and building, you're continuing to flex those muscles and to,
Hmm.
build up those muscles. And the same thing happens with meditation. So the more we do it, the more our mind remembers how to get there. And what's so cool, and I know you know this, Chris, but it is so cool how it starts to bleed into our regular non-meditation life, where that state, the ways that we're using our brain, or you talk about it as like you're sliding into meditation. So if you think of like the brain wave state and that calm, kind of steady brain wave
Hmm.
syncing up with the heart, all of that happening, those pathways, if we want to think of it that way, get stronger and deeper. And so even in our regular non-meditative life, we carry that calmness with us. It's harder for us to get triggered, and it ripples out because we are energy. So we are emanating what we are, and it's coming through our eyes, it's coming through our pores, it's coming through our heart. Energetically, there are no secrets. So, it's like as we interact with people in the outer world, they're feeling that, and it's shifting them as well. It's like
Exactly.
reconfiguring their energy fields too, which is
Yeah.
just amazing.
That's so cool. And you touched on something that's so important. It's especially meditation, consistency over duration. Everybody thinks, oh, I've got to sit here with my legs crossed for 2 hours and just got to do it. And I'll do it once and I'll do it next week. Like, no, do it 2 minutes every day. Do
Right.
it 5 minutes every day. In the beginning, if you just do it 2 minutes, you're done. In the beginning, just kind of think, okay, you're getting used to it. And after a while, maybe you're doing it 5 minutes a day, maybe you got 10 minutes a day, you'll start to find that, hey, I kind of enjoy this thing called meditation. I kind of look forward to it now. I mean, that's eventually what's wound up happening to me. Like I said, I got addicted to it. I was like, I look forward to it. I can't have a day where I cannot do it because I was so excited. So I enjoyed it so much that I just wanted to keep doing it. And there was something magical about 12 months. I don't know exactly what the 12 months is, but there's something about 12 months where even in the UK, mediumship circles, they only allow people into a mediumship circle if they've been sitting in the power for 12 months straight.
Oh, is that right?
There's
Oh,
like
that's interesting.
a lot of these circles don't let people in unless they've done the sitting in the power meditation for 12 months.
Hmm.
Because to your point, your brain waves, your whole body, your whole energy system has shifted where you're so much more relaxed, you're so much more at peace and calm. Your energy state is now you're emitting higher vibration energy. You're more open, so your frequency is enabling and allowing spiritual energy to come to you more readily. You're not blocking. Everybody says, what's the veil? Well, guess what, people? Our own brains are the veil. Our own mind is the veil. And if we turn off the ego mind and we focus on our creative mind that allows us to go into a daydream state, that's that's the difference. It's like the center of our head, center of our brain. That's our veil.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there was something that you were saying, oh, the 12 months and how it affects the energy.
Yeah, right.
The other piece to it is the more or another, there's so many pieces to it,
So many.
but as we build up the habit and
Right.
it affects our energy. It gives us more energy. It gives us more life force, I
Right.
mean, literally, it is this life force. It is a real thing that is flowing through us. We have more of it when we're not meditating, when we're kind of on the surface of life and we're getting knocked about by life. Our aura, our energy fields have these holes in it. They've got these tears. We've got hooks. We have this unstable energy, and it can actually cause us to, for most people unknowingly, we drain because we need the energy from other places, other people. We aren't self-sufficient in our energy. So we're like, it's very possible that we're siphoning maybe without meaning to, because we need other people's life force to keep us going.
Become
And that
energy
can be
vampires.
exactly. And that can be energy vampire, can be, that we're creating drama. There are lots of ways that we do it,
Hmm.
that it affects things negatively.
Yeah.
And so when you're wanting to have people together that have a level of spiritual maturity, it makes sense that you want them to have cultivated the ability to be generating their own energy field, because that's going to create such a
Yeah.
more harmonious dynamic within the group, because you don't
Yes.
have people who need, to feed off of other people.
That's really well said. Yeah, and that does make a lot of sense. It enables people to be all at at or above a specific threshold of energetic emanation and
Hmm.
vibration, because
Yeah.
the entire power of the group is only as good. It's like the saying, the strength of a group is only as strong as the weakest link. It's the same
Hmm.
concept right there.
Right.
The
Yeah.
strength of a mediumship circle is only as high as the lowest vibration.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And we kind of lift each other up too.
Yeah.
And so if you're around people who are holding a higher vibration, it will lift. You may not notice it, but you notice you'll feel great. I mean, it makes me think this. I've been watching Star Wars, the first three of like the
Oh,
prequel, and I'm on the third one.
uh-oh.
And the council of the Jedi, right? And they're all these masters, these high masters who very mindful of their life force. But you can imagine, like, because I was just watching where Anakin, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but it's been around for a while. Um, but like they won't let him on the council.
Yeah.
And, or they let him on the council, but they won't call him a master or whatever, but it's
Mhm.
like there is this whole process of needing to be able to reach a level of maturity, but really around the cultivation and the maintenance of your own energy and being able to yield it and wield it in a responsible way. It just comes with practice. So there's no like shame if you've been meditating for like 2 months and like, "Oh my gosh, I couldn't be, in one of those
Right.
circles or whatever." But it's just a
Sure.
matter of like almost like initiation rites. Like everybody's taking their own steps
Yeah.
and we'll get there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say, 'cause some people who might get frustrated and say, "Oh, well, I'm not, there. It's gonna take me forever." Just think about it as in terms of, how does it make you feel?
Yeah.
If it makes you feel good, then do it.
Enjoy it.
And because enjoy it, and because there's so many different types of meditation, choose a meditation style that works for you. Some
Mhm.
people like movement meditation where they just enjoy walking every day, or some people enjoy gardening. They go into a gardening mode, and the next thing they know, they're meditating because they're not even thinking about anything other than just scraping the soil.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, maybe you like transcendental meditation, maybe you like visualization meditation. But there's seven kinds, but there are many, 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 many subdivisions that you can choose.
Mhm.
So it's like, what's best for you? Has a feel? Do you enjoy it? And do a style that you enjoy, so you keep on coming back and you maintain the consistency.
Yes, exactly. I love it.
Wow. So, I mean, one of the things that's so interesting is when you begin to get to that point where you have raised your energy, you've had that spiritual awakening, or two or three or many, or however it is. The big question I always get is, okay, well, I'm starting to feel like I'm getting signs or messages or something, but how do I know it's a sign and or a message? Maybe my guide is trying to connect with me versus just my imagination. How do I do
Ooh,
that? And then there's so many people saying, "How do I do that? What's the difference?" And how do I
yes.
interpret these things? What do they mean?
Yes. I love it. I wanna hear what you have to say about that too, because it's such a great question, and because you are, like, clairvoyant and you can see, that is the gift that I mean, you see things, right? With your inner sight?
Yeah, a whole bunch
Yeah.
of different, yeah, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't, I do sometimes like see things in the like more, but it's more of like a quantum realm type of thing. And it's not consistent. But the imagination and the either or, is it real? Is it my imagination? I have been there. I mean, that I
Yeah.
lived there for so long. And it was such a frustrating thing for me because I'd be like, well, this came to me in meditation, this idea, this thought, this maybe even an image. And I had a mentor at the time, and I'd be like, well, do you think that was real, or do you think it was my imagination? Or I'd perceive some sort of message, and it was the same thing. And he'd be like, and Kara, it's not or, it's and. And he's like, stop trying to dismiss your imagination. And this has been a thing that I've really had to embrace. And it took work for me to embrace because I've been such an either or type of person for so long, very right brained.
Yep.
And I wanted to make sure it was real. But the imagination is a gateway. And it's a way that we utilize the imagination in order to be carried into what is real. And there are people who talk about, really, there is nothing that's not real. Your imagination, everything exists. So if you're perceiving it in your imagination, it's because it exists. And that's interesting because I remember reading a book by Dr. Larry Dossey, and I think he was even referencing somebody else who had said this, but for me, it comes from Dr. Larry Dossey, where he says that the brain, there's an idea or a theory that the brain is like a filter, or it's like a receptor. So rather than it creating, it is perceiving. It is receiving input, and what you're perceiving is based on your frequency, just the way that a radio works. You turn the dial in the olden days, again, child of the 80s, but you could turn the car dial and that little marker would move up and down. The needle, yes, it would move up and down the numbers.
Yep.
And you'd dial it in. You'd find the frequency of the radio station that you were looking at. And we are energy and we operate at frequencies. So the frequency that we're operating on, it dictates what we're tuning into, what we're receiving. And even if we're receiving new ideas, it could be, rather than us like, oh, I have an idea, like, oh, I received an idea. And this is interesting because we see this with inventions where different places around the world, there will be multiple people inventing the same thing at the same time, but they don't know each other.
Yes.
I mean, what a fascinating phenomenon. Then there's this race to patent, and you see this in the arts where, people have the same movie script idea or the same song, like songs sound very similar and they're coming out, at the same time. And there was like Liz Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love. I remember her talking in an interview once, and I think she was actually talking about somebody else, like Anais Nin or something. And whoever it was lived in this like old farmhouse at the top of a hill. At least this is how I remember it. And she would be out like hanging clothes on the clothesline. There's like nobody around. And she would feel this energy rushing up the hill, and it would move through her like the wind, and it would move through her, and an idea would come in, like a poem or whatever it was. And she would have to stop what she was doing and go write it down before it moved on to find somebody who would do something with it. And I love that and I've experienced this where I've felt like there is an idea. Like I hosted an online summit in last fall, and I'd never done one before. And I was just sitting at my table, and all of a sudden this inspiration started coming in, where it was like hosting this online summit, and I kept getting this slumber party feel. And it's like, when you're a kid and you have a slumber party and, maybe people start talking about ghost stories or something like that, and everybody's kind of egging each other on, and you're getting scared, and like the energy's getting heightened because everybody's kind of like on edge because you're all thinking about ghosts and all of this. And it was like that idea, but around miracles. And so we're all entering the energy of miracles, and we're remembering and we're sharing and we're invoking, because we're all paying attention to the concept of miracles and how they've shown up and how we kind of align ourselves so that they come in. But anyway, this idea, it felt like it was around me and it wasn't fully formed, but it was there.
Yeah.
And so I kind of started brainstorming just in that moment with no intention. Like it just felt like it came out of nowhere, but I was like, ooh, that could be cool. But because it wasn't fully formed, it's like, can I do that? Like, do I have the skill set to do that? Like, do I need to hire somebody to do it? Should I tell somebody about it so somebody else can do it and I can just watch? Because that sounds super cool.
That's the ego mind going, I'm not sure, I'm going to be skeptical, I'm logical, I'm not sure, I'm not right, it's not for me.
Yes. Seems like a lot of work. Do
Yeah,
I have time for that?
I'm not
And
worthy.
would I do it right? Would I mess it
Yeah.
up? And so it was just really cool. Like that whole process of like, you've got the bones, and then the more you're with it, like it starts to get some more meat to it. And then, it gets some flesh. But that is kind of like, it felt co-creative. It
Cool.
felt like it was out here and it was up to me to kind of bring it in and give it legs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of the whole point. It's just like some people say, how do I know it's real? It's you're creating your existence as you breathe. So
Yeah.
it's what you're receiving is what is already there, to your point, but it's your ego mind that tries to distract you. And you definitely know it's not yours if all of a sudden it drops out of nowhere. If it's
Yeah.
coming out of the blue and your, series of thought is going in a different direction, this kind of falls out of a complete randomness. You're like, that's not me.
Yeah. Right.
And it also, if like it's connecting to your heart, you're like, well, there's some meaning behind it. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel the meaning. It's coming from spirit. It's coming from outside you. And
Right.
that's really to what you were getting the ideas. You were getting the feeling. You were allowing it to take on, but you felt your ego. You felt your Frankie brain, your analytical mind starting to kick in and talk back. You're like, and then there was this tug of war back and forth. So
Right.
to your mentor's point, it's both.
Yes, exactly. And we to that point, we are receiving this information and we are the creators, we are the actors. So maybe there are times that we receive inspiration. It might be from spirit, but it may not be from an influence that we want to, that is in our highest good. I had a conversation with somebody in Australia, and she was talking about how she was channeling a book, and she's like, it's so twisted, it's so dark. I'm really surprised. Like, I can't
Right.
believe, and she's a healer, and and I'm thinking to myself, but is that what you want to focus? Like, is that where you want to
Yeah.
put your attention and your energy? If you do, if you're enjoying it, then fine, like express yourself in that way. There's no judgment. But like, just because it's coming from, just because you're channeling it doesn't mean you have to.
You got to
Because
discern it.
you're spending your time, your energy, you're sharing your energetic space with something. You're not forced to do that. Like if it
Right.
doesn't feel right, if it feels dark, if you feel like you're creating something that is harmful, I would second guess that and be in your power and, reclaim it and be like, no, that's
Yeah.
not for me. I'm not
Yeah.
participating in that.
Yeah, and that's a great point because discernment is so critical. If you're receiving something that doesn't feel right, then don't do it. If it
Mhm.
feels right, then follow it. Your heart is your compass. Your heart will tell you what direction feels right. It's going to lead you in the right direction. Your heart, as a compass, is never going to lead you astray. And so do that. And also, people say, "Well, don't have to do protection and all this kind of stuff." Like, well, just set your intention. Once you set the intention for your highest good, for all concerned, nothing else matters because
Yeah.
spirit cannot interfere with your free will, and you've just created your existence once more.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, so that's great. So, as we close out, what piece of advice do you think you'd give to a listener as they're on their spiritual journey? And maybe they've just started, maybe they're kind of somewhere along their journey, but they're either questioning themselves or they're saying to themselves, "What next?" or "How do I?" or "Where do I go?" and all this. What would you say to somebody on their spiritual path as they're trying to expand and accelerate their growth?
Yeah, I love that closing. For me, what comes up right now is connecting with their own higher self and their guides, remembering that everybody has guidance. Everybody has that inspiration that you can tap into your intuition. And we all have that support on the other side, even when it's veiled. even when we might need to use our imagination. I mean, I still, imagination, when I want to connect with my guides, which is frequently, still requires a healthy dose of my imagination because I don't see them in front of
Yeah.
me. And so I trust that they're there. I get a lot of evidence, as I move through my day that they're in play, but I don't see them. They're not physical, and it's subtle. It's so subtle. And so that's part of it, is being able to, as we keep going, we can tune into those subtleties. We start to recognize the subtleties, and we start to be able to trust them and recognize them more. But if you keep reaching out and you keep intending that you're connecting, and I love what you brought in with the highest good, that this is for the highest good for everybody. They will interact with you. They want to interact with you. They're waiting for you to reach out. But you also mentioned free will. It's our will. They're not here to interfere. So if we choose to live our lives with them, with no awareness of them, that's our choice, and they will respect that. So invite them in. And I think that's an amazing starting point. It's an amazing intermediary point, and it's an amazing advanced point. Keep working with your guides. You've got so much support. You're not alone. I would never recommend, foregoing that support at any level, no matter if you are Yoda. Yoda is using the Force, and I'm sure he's using his connections on the other side, no matter how advanced you are. So that's what comes up.
Oh, that's so well said. It's a great piece of advice. So thank you so much for coming on the show. This was absolutely wonderful. How can people get in contact with you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've loved this. My website is karagoodwin.com. I have my new book out, which I have here if you're watching the video. And you can get your copy. I'm not sure when this will come out, but it comes out everywhere. I'm not sure when this episode will come out. The book comes out everywhere April 21st globally. If you're in the US and this is dropping before then, you can get it. I can send you a signed copy that you can get exclusively from karagoodwin.com/book. And I've got my podcast, soulelevationpodcast.com we've got like over 400 episodes out there. You can find me on Instagram, Kara_Goodwin_meditation. I'm pretty easy to find.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like you're out there, and people can easily find you. So awesome. So thank you again for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Chris. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Well, I'm glad we were sipping our grande lattes together.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Spirit Beside Us. Hope this was meaningful and enjoyable. And if you like the episode and you like the show, by all means, give us a thumbs up, like us. That way you'll stay on the feed. You'll keep on getting every episode every time it comes in. And, always look to connect with your guides, connect with your spirit. There's always all sorts of ways you can do that. Just all you got to do is reach out, as Kara was saying. Invite them in. So with that, this is Chris. We're going to sign off, and I'm going to send you love and light, and I will talk to you next time. Until later. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.